The stars had voices, and every voice had rules. Ambassador Hyunwoo stood on the bridge of the New Seoul, watching the blue glow of the universal communication grid dance across his screens. The grid was everywhere in space. It connected every planet, every ship, every station where thinking beings lived. When someone wanted to talk, the grid carried their words instantly across the galaxy. The humans had learned this the hard way 3 years ago. When Earth first built ships that could travel faster than light, they thought they were alone in the dark. Then the grid found them. Suddenly, voices filled their radios, hundreds of alien species, all talking at once. The noise was so loud that Captain Soo-jin, who commanded that first human ship, thought her equipment was broken. But the noise was not broken equipment. It was normal life in the galaxy. Now Hyunwoo knew the rules. When you entered a new star system, you announced yourself. You said who you were, where you came from, and what you wanted. You waited for permission before you moved. You asked before you took anything. You talked before you fought. The other species called humans the quiet species. They said humans did not talk enough. The Vorthak were made of living crystal. They sang their thoughts in high, clear notes that could travel through solid rock. When a Vorthak wanted to say hello, their song could be heard on every planet in their system. The Nimari had no solid bodies. They were clouds of smart gas that could think and feel. They talked by changing colors and shapes. A single Nimari could have a conversation that looked like a rainbow storm. The Kelith looked like giant insects, but they were smart like humans. They talked by clicking their hard shells together. The sound was so complex that it took human computers months to understand even simple Kelith words. All of these species had one thing in common. They never stopped talking. Hyunwoo had spent 3 years learning how to be polite in a galaxy where silence was rude. He had attended meetings that lasted for weeks because every decision needed discussion. He had watched trade deals take months because both sides had to agree on every tiny detail before anyone could act. Sometimes he missed the old days on Earth, when people could work together without talking about every small thing. Captain Bo Young understood this feeling. She commanded the Iron Mountain, humanity's first real warship in space. While Hyunwoo dealt with diplomats and traders, Bo Young prepared for the day when talking might not be enough. The Iron Mountain was different from other ships in the galaxy. Most alien warships were covered in bright lights and loud transmitters. They announced their weapons, broadcast their power levels, and sent warnings before they fired. Galactic law required this. Every weapon had to identify itself before it could be used. But human weapons were different. Engineer Gayun had spent 2 years building something the galaxy had never seen. She called it a railgun. It used magnets to throw pieces of metal faster than anything else in space. The best part was that it made no sound that alien sensors could hear. Bo Young did not know if this mattered. Humans had joined the galaxy as friends, not enemies. The Galactic Council had welcomed Earth with ceremonies and gifts. There was supposed to be peace between all thinking species. But Bo Young remembered human history. She knew that peace could end quickly. The Iron Mountain was heading to Kepler 442b, a small planet where humans had built a mining colony. The colony dug rare metals out of the ground and sent them back to Earth. It was boring work, but important work. Captain Taemin commanded the colony's defenses. He had 6 small ships and 40 soldiers. Not much protection, but the galaxy was supposed to be safe. The communication grid connected the colony to the rest of human space. If trouble came, help was always just a message away. At least, that was the theory. The trouble came on a Tuesday morning colony time. Taemin was drinking coffee and reading reports when his communication officer, Yoon-ji, started shouting, "Captain! Ships coming out of jump space! Big ones!" Taemin ran to the command center. On the main screen, he could see them, 6 large ships, black and angular, with the distinctive shell-pattern hull that meant only one thing: Kelith. The communication grid immediately came alive with noise. The Keleth ships were broadcasting on all frequencies, following the ancient rules of galactic warfare. They announced their names, their clan affiliations, and their demands. Human colony, the lead Keleth clicked through the translation system. You have built on Keleth hunting grounds. You will leave this place. You have one standard day to load your ships and go. If you stay, we will take this world by force. Unji looked at Tae-min with worried eyes. Captain, what do we do? The Galactic Council says this planet belongs to humans, but the Keleth say it's their hunting ground. Tae-min stared at the screen. According to galactic law, the Keleth should have filed a territorial dispute with the Council first. But galactic law was slow, and the Keleth were known for caring. More about old traditions than new rules. The smart thing to do was talk. Send a message to the Council, start negotiations, follow the proper procedures. In a few months, maybe a few years, the lawyers would decide who really owned this planet. But Tae-min looked at the mining equipment outside his window. He thought about the 40 families living in the colony. He thought about the months of work they had put into making this place home. Then he thought about Captain Bo Young and the Iron Mountain. Yoon-ji, he said quietly, send a message to the Iron Mountain. Tell them we need help. Tell them to come fast. What about the Keleth? Yoon-ji asked. Tae-min watched the alien ships move into attack position. They were following the old rules, giving humans time to surrender with honor. It was supposed to be civilized. Tell the Keleth we're thinking about their offer, Tae-min said. Tell them we need time to discuss it with our people. It was not exactly a lie, but it was not exactly the truth either. And in the space between truth and lies, there was room for Captain Bo Young to arrive with her railgun. The galaxy was about to learn that humans had their own rules. The Iron Mountain came out of jump space like a ghost. Captain Bo Young felt the familiar twist in her stomach as the ship returned to normal space. Around her, the bridge crew worked at their stations, checking systems and scanning for threats. The journey from human space had taken 18 hours. She hoped they were not too late. Captain, said Lieutenant Ji-hoon from the sensor station, I have the Keleth fleet on screen. 6 ships in standard intimidation formation around the planet. Bo Young studied the display. The Keleth ships hung in space like black daggers, their hulls reflecting the light of Kepler 442b's sun. They were beautiful in a deadly way, all sharp angles and gleaming armor. Each ship was twice the size of the Iron Mountain. Any sign of fighting? Bo Young asked. Negative, Captain. The colony is still transmitting. The Keleth are holding position and broadcasting demands. Bo Young nodded. That was good news. The Keleth were following the old rules of galactic warfare. They had made their challenge and given the humans time to respond. According to tradition, there should be hours of negotiation before any shots were fired. Communications. Open a channel to the Keleth flagship. The main screen flickered, and suddenly Bo Young was looking at a Keleth war commander. The alien's face was mostly hidden behind a battle mask, but she could see its 4 eyes glowing with cold intelligence. When it spoke, its voice came through the translation system as a series of sharp clicks. Human ship. I am War Commander Jektal of the clan that hunts between stars. You are not welcome in this place. Leave now, or face the consequences. Bo Young kept her voice calm and professional. War Commander, this is Captain Bo Young of the human ship Iron Mountain. This planet belongs to humans under Galactic Council law. Your claim has no legal basis. The Keleth commander made a sound that the translator could not convert. Laws made by soft species who forgot how to fight. This world was a Keleth hunting ground for 1,000 years before your species learned to leave your home dirt. Nevertheless, Commander, the law is clear. If you have a territorial dispute, you should file it with the proper authorities. The only authority I recognize is strength. Jektal clicked. Your mining colony has no real defenses. Your single ship cannot stand against my fleet. Surrender now, and your people may leave with their lives. Bo Young glanced at her tactical officer, Sang Woo, who shook his head slightly. The Keleth were right about the odds. 6 ships against 1 was not a fair fight by any normal measure, but the Iron Mountain was not a normal ship. "Commander," Bo Young said, "I need to discuss this with my crew. Will you give us 1 hour to decide?" The Keleth commander's eyes seemed to glow brighter. 1 hour. Then you will surrender or be destroyed." The communication ended, leaving Bo Young staring at a tactical display that showed 6 enemy ships surrounding her position. According to everything she had learned about galactic warfare, she should be looking for a way to retreat with honor. Instead, she turned to Engineer Ga-un, who had been waiting quietly at the back of the bridge. "Is it ready?" Bo Young asked. Ga-un smiled. It was not a nice smile. "Captain, the railgun has been ready since we left Earth. We just needed someone to test it on." Deep in the Iron Mountain's hull, the railgun waited in silence. It did not look like much from the outside. Just a long tube surrounded by magnetic coils, no glowing energy chambers, no charging indicators, no warning lights that would tell enemy sensors what was coming. The weapon was simple in concept. Powerful magnets would accelerate a tungsten rod down the length of the tube. The rod would leave the ship at 15% of light speed. At that velocity, it would not need explosives. The kinetic energy alone would be enough to destroy anything it hit. Ga-un ran her final checks. Power levels were good. Magnetic alignment was perfect. The targeting computer had a solid lock on the Keleth flagship. "Captain," she reported through the comm system, "we're ready to fire on your command." On the bridge, Bo Young looked at her. "Crew." These were good people who had signed up to explore the galaxy, not to start wars. But sometimes wars started whether you wanted them or not. "Tactical assessment," she said to Sang-woo. "The Keleth are confident, Captain. They're not even running full shields. Their formation is designed for intimidation, not defense. If we hit them fast and hard, we might be able to take out their flagship before they realize what's happening." Bo Young thought about the communication grid protocols she had studied. When a ship fired an energy weapon, it had to charge up first. The charging process sent out electromagnetic signals that enemy sensors could detect. This gave the target time to raise shields and prepare for battle. It was considered fair play, but the railgun did not charge up. It did not send warning signals. It just fired. "Dr. Wu Jin," Bo Young said to the xenolinguist who had come along to study Keleth culture, "what will happen if we attack without warning?" Wu Jin looked uncomfortable. "Captain, it's never been done before. Galactic warfare has rules that go back thousands of years. You announce your attacks. You give the enemy time to respond. It's supposed to be civilized. And if we don't follow those rules? I don't know. The computer systems that monitor galactic warfare are designed around the assumption that all weapons give warning. If we fire something that doesn't show up on their sensors..." Wu Jin trailed off, looking worried. Bo Young made her decision. "All crew, this is the captain. We are about to engage the enemy. What we're going to do has never been tried before. We're going to fire a weapon that the galaxy has never seen. I don't know what will happen after we pull the trigger, but I know that 40 human families are counting on us to protect them." She looked at Ga-un on the view screen. "Fire." The railgun fired in perfect silence. There was no flash of light. No sound of energy discharge, no electromagnetic signature that enemy sensors could detect. One moment, the tungsten rod was sitting in the weapons chamber. The next moment, it was crossing space at 45,000 kilometers per second. The Keleth flagship had no time to react. Its shields were down. Its armor was designed to stop energy weapons, not solid projectiles moving at relativistic speeds. The tungsten rod punched through the ship's hull like a bullet through paper. But that was just the beginning. When 40 kilograms of metal moving at 15% of light speed suddenly stopped, the kinetic energy had to go somewhere. The conversion was instant and catastrophic. The entire front section of the Keleth flagship simply ceased to exist, converted to plasma and radiation in a microsecond. The rest of the ship followed a moment later as the shock wave propagated through its structure. Metal twisted and tore. Internal bulkheads collapsed. Atmosphere vented into space in glowing streams. In less than 10 seconds, the pride of the Keleth fleet was nothing but expanding debris. The other 5 Keleth ships sat in space, their crews, trying to understand what had happened. Their sensors showed no energy weapon discharge, no warning signals, no electromagnetic signature at all. As far as their instruments could tell, their flagship had simply exploded for no reason. War Commander Jektal was dead. His second-in-command, Sub-Commander Kek Jin, stared at her sensor readings and felt something that Keleth rarely experienced. Fear. What destroyed the flagship? She clicked to her sensor officer. Unknown, Commander. No energy discharge detected, no projectile signatures. The ship simply died. On the Iron Mountain, Bo Young watched the remaining Keleth ships begin to retreat. They were backing away slowly, their weapons powered but not aimed. They looked like animals that had encountered something outside their understanding of the world. Captain, said Communications Officer Mina, the communication grid is lighting up. Every monitoring station in the sector is trying to figure out what happened. The automated systems are sending error reports. Bo Young frowned. Error reports? Dr. Wu Jin was studying his own displays, and his face had gone pale. Captain, the galactic warfare monitoring systems can't classify what we just did. They're programmed to catalog and report all military actions, but our railgun doesn't fit any known weapon profile. The AI systems are trying to process an attack that, according to their databases, is impossible. Far away, across the galaxy, ancient computer systems that had managed interstellar warfare for thousands of years began to encounter their first real crisis. Deep in the quantum cores that powered the communication grid, error messages cascaded through data pathways that had never seen an error before. The galaxy had forgotten that there were other ways to fight, but it was about to remember. The news traveled faster than light, but truth traveled much slower. Admiral Dong Hyun sat in the emergency session chamber of the Galactic Council, watching alien diplomats argue about something that none of them understood. 3 weeks had passed since the Iron Mountain's attack on the Keleth fleet, and the galaxy was still trying to figure out what had happened. The Vorthak delegate was singing her concerns in crystal-clear notes that hurt human ears. Through the translation system, her song became words. The humans have developed reality-warping technology. Our scientists cannot explain how matter simply vanished from normal space. The Nimari representative shifted into an angry red cloud formation. Time acceleration, the translation said. They must have sped up a conventional weapon to impossible speeds. Our gas-form physics suggests temporal manipulation. The Keleth war speaker clicked furiously behind his ceremonial mask. Death magic. The humans made our flagship cease to exist without cause. No honorable species possesses such terrible power. Dong Hyun wanted to laugh, but the situation was too serious. These brilliant species had created faster-than-light travel, quantum communication, and artificial intelligence. But none of them could imagine a simple kinetic weapon. Honored delegates, Dong Hyun said, standing slowly. If I may explain what actually happened. Silence! The council speaker, an ancient Vorthak whose crystal body had grown cloudy with age, rang a note that made the chamber walls vibrate. Human Admiral, you will speak only when asked direct questions. Dong Hyun sat down. He had been in meetings like this for 6 hours straight. Every time he tried to explain railgun technology, the translation systems produced gibberish. The galactic languages had no words for purely kinetic weapon, because such weapons had never existed in their history. Worse, the communication grid was starting to malfunction. Back on Earth, scientist Mi Kyung worked frantically in her laboratory, trying to understand what was happening to galactic communications. Her screens showed cascade failures spreading through the quantum network that connected every inhabited world. The problem isn't hardware, she explained to Director Jun Ho over a video link. The AI systems that manage the communication grid are having a logical breakdown. They were programmed with certain assumptions about how warfare works. What kind of assumptions? Junho asked. All weapons announce themselves. All attacks can be detected and categorized. All military actions follow established protocols. When we fired that railgun, we violated every one of those assumptions. Mikyung pulled up a holographic display showing the grid's AI decision trees. Look at this. The system is trying to process our attack, but it can't fit the data into any existing category. So it keeps trying the same analysis over and over, generating error reports each time. Can't the system just create a new category? That's the problem. These AIs are thousands of years old. They were designed to be stable and predictable. They can't adapt to completely new situations. Instead of learning, they're defaulting to isolation protocols. On the display, Mikyung showed how communication nodes across the galaxy were going dark. Species were losing contact with each other as the ancient systems shut down rather than process impossible data. Junho stared at the spreading darkness on the galactic map. How long before total collapse? At this rate? Maybe 6 months. The grid is disconnecting entire sectors to prevent error cascade spread. Soon, species won't be able to talk to each other at all. The isolation had already begun. The Vorthak were the first to withdraw from galactic society. Their crystal minds, normally filled with the constant music of interstellar communication, fell silent as they pulled back to their home systems. At first, other species thought the Vorthak were angry about the human weapon. But communication specialist Jae Hyun discovered something more disturbing when he managed to establish contact with a Vorthak outpost. They're not angry, he reported, to Earth Command. They're grateful. The Vorthak say that without the constant noise from the communication grid, they can think clearly for the first time in centuries. What do you mean? Asked Commander Yong Ho. The Vorthak evolved as solitary thinkers. Their crystal minds work best in silence. But when they joined galactic civilization, they became addicted to constant communication. They say they had forgotten what it felt like to have their own thoughts. Similar reports came from across the galaxy. The Nimari, who had spent generations as individual gas clouds before learning to communicate, were rediscovering their ability to exist as separate beings. Some Kelith clans were activating ancient warrior protocols that predated the communication grid by thousands of years. It seemed that every species had given up something important when they joined the galactic community. Now, with communication breaking down, they were remembering what they had lost. But the breakdown was not peaceful. On the outer rim, territorial disputes that had been frozen in diplomatic ice for centuries began to heat up again. Without the communication grid to mediate conflicts, old enemies started shooting first and asking questions later. Trade routes collapsed as merchant ships lost contact with their destinations. Exploration fleets found themselves stranded in deep space when their navigation beacons went silent. The worst part was the fear. Captain Inho led a human diplomatic mission to the Vorthak home system, hoping to restore some kind of communication. What he found there changed his understanding of the crisis. The Vorthak weren't hiding from humans. They were hiding from themselves. "We are afraid," sang crystal singer Hyun Woo, one of the few Vorthak still willing to talk to outsiders. "For 10,000 years, we have not been alone with our thoughts. Now that the noise has stopped, we discover that we do not know how to think without the voices of others." "But you're thinking now," Inho pointed out. "You're talking to me." "Yes, and it terrifies us. We had forgotten that we could make decisions without consensus. We had forgotten that we could act without permission. Your species has reminded us of something we thought we had evolved beyond." "What's that?" Heian Wu's crystal body flashed with nervous colors. "Independence. The ability to exist without constant contact with others. Your people do this naturally. You can go hours, even days, without talking to anyone. To us, this seems like a superpower." Inho began to understand. Humans had developed in isolation on Earth, with multiple languages and cultures that often could not communicate effectively. Humanity was comfortable with misunderstanding, comfortable with silence, comfortable with making decisions based on incomplete information. The rest of the galaxy had evolved differently. They had learned to communicate perfectly, to share every thought, to never act without group approval. It had made them peaceful and cooperative, but it had also made them dependent. What happens if the communication grid never comes back? Inho asked. Hyunwoo's song became sad and low. Some species will learn to be independent again, others will fragment and destroy themselves. A few might become something new, but the galaxy as we knew it is ending. And humans? Humans will survive. You always have. Back on Earth, the government faced an impossible choice. Human fleets were the only ones still operating effectively in the communication breakdown. Human colonies were thriving while alien settlements struggled. Humanity could easily become the dominant power in a fractured galaxy. Admiral Dong Hyun stood before the Earth Defense Council, presenting options that no one wanted to consider. "We could take advantage of the situation," he said quietly. "Our ships can operate in electromagnetic silence. We could conquer systems before their defenders could even call for help. Within a few years, humans could control half the galaxy. And the other option?" asked Council Leader Myong-ja. "We try to fix what we broke. We help the other species learn to live without constant communication. We teach them what humans learned the hard way, how to think for themselves." The debate went on for hours. Some council members wanted to expand human territory while they had the advantage. Others insisted that humanity had a responsibility to help their galactic neighbors. In the end, it was a message from Captain Bo Young that decided the issue. "Humanity didn't come to the stars to be conquerors," her transmission said. "We came to be explorers, to learn new things and meet new people. If we use this crisis to grab power, we'll become everything we left Earth to escape." The Council made their choice. Humanity would try to rebuild galactic civilization, not replace it. But first, they had to figure out how to teach an entire galaxy something that humans had always taken for granted: how to be comfortable with silence. The galaxy had learned a new kind of silence, and it was not peaceful. Captain Inho stood on the observation deck of his ship, watching the Vorthak crystal cities floating in the darkness of space. 6 months ago, those cities had hummed with constant communication, their crystal spires glowing with data streams from across the galaxy. Now they hung silent and dark, like beautiful monuments to a dead civilization. But the Vorthak were not dead. They were changing. "Captain," called linguist So Young from behind him. "Crystal Singer Heejin is ready to meet with us, but she warns that the conversation will be different." Inho nodded. Every contact with alien species had become different since the communication grid collapsed. The old protocols of constant chatter and careful consensus had given way to something harder and more direct. The meeting took place in a crystal chamber that had once been a communications center. Hundreds of quantum transmitters sat dark and unused, while Crystal Singer Hae-jin floated in the center, her body shifting through colors that So Young had never seen before. "Human Captain," Hae-jin sang, but her voice was different too, clearer, more focused. "We must discuss the new reality." "We're listening," Inho said. "My people are splitting apart. Half of us want to rebuild the old communication networks. They cannot bear the silence. They gather in groups, singing together constantly, trying to recreate the noise of the grid." Hae-jin's crystal body flashed red, then purple. "The other half have discovered something we had forgotten: independence, the ability to think without the opinions of others crowding our minds. We do not want the grid to return." So Young leaned forward. "What do the independents want?" "To be left alone. To make our own decisions, to exist without permission." Hae-jin paused, her colors cycling, through shades that the translation system couldn't interpret. "Some of them are developing weapons." Inho felt his stomach tighten. What kind of weapons? Silent ones, like yours. They study the reports of your railgun attack. They want to build devices that can act without warning, without negotiation, without the old rules. This was the nightmare scenario that Earth Command had feared. The galaxy wasn't just losing its ability to communicate. It was learning to fight without talking first. On the other side of the galaxy, the Keleth were having similar problems, but their solution was more direct. War Commander Kek Jin had survived the destruction of her clan's flagship, and the experience had changed her. She no longer trusted the old ways of warfare, with their elaborate challenges and formal declarations. If enemies could strike without warning, then she would learn to do the same. "Show me the human weapon again," she clicked to her science. "Officer." The holographic display showed the Iron Mountain's attack on the Keleth fleet, analyzed frame by frame. The human ship had fired something invisible, something that moved faster than shields could activate. "Can we build one?" Kek Jin asked. "The principles are simple," her officer replied. "Magnetic acceleration, kinetic impact. But our ships are not designed for such crude methods. We would need to rebuild everything." "Then we rebuild. Start with the smallest ships. I want a fleet that can strike like the humans do. Silent, fast, deadly." Similar conversations were happening across the galaxy. Species that had spent thousands of years talking their way through conflicts were now preparing for wars without words. But the most disturbing news came from Earth itself. Chan Wu, head of human xenological studies, had been monitoring the breakdown of galactic communication for months. What he discovered made him call an emergency meeting with Earth Command. "It's not just fear," he explained to the assembled officials. "The alien species aren't just afraid of our weapons. They're afraid of us." "What do you mean?" asked Admiral Dong Hyun. "Think about it from their perspective. Every species in the galaxy developed a need for constant communication. It's built into their psychology, their technology, their entire way of life. But humans never developed that need." Chan Wu activated a holographic display showing human brain scans alongside alien neural patterns. "We can go hours, even days, without talking to anyone. We make decisions based on incomplete information. We act independently without group consensus. To them, this isn't just unusual, it's impossible." So they think we might not be like them at all. Some alien scientists are starting to theorize that humans aren't really a social species. They think we might be something like intelligent predators who learn to mimic social behavior. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. "They think we're pretending to be civilized?" asked Commander Yong Ho. "Worse. They think civilization might be a trick we use to get close to our prey. After all, we joined galactic society peacefully, learned their rules, gained their trust. Then, the moment there was a conflict, we deployed a weapon that none of them had ever imagined." Admiral Dong Hyun stared at the brain scans. "Are they right?" Chan Wu hesitated. "Maybe partially. Humans did evolve as hunters. We are comfortable with deception, with incomplete information, with acting alone. These traits helped us survive on Earth, but they also make us very different from species that evolved as pure cooperators." The revelation explained why some alien species were trying to develop silent weapons. They weren't just preparing for war. They were trying to become more like humans. On a research station in the Nimari Cloud Nebula, scientist Po Ran was conducting experiments that would have been impossible before the communication breakdown. The Nimari had always been collective, thinkers, sharing thoughts and emotions through color and movement. But Po Ran had learned to exist as a single entity, separated from the collective mind. The experience was terrifying and wonderful. "I can think thoughts that no other Nimari knows," Po Ran reported to the few humans still in contact with Nimari space. "I can make decisions without asking for permission. I can be wrong without disappointing others. But Poran's independence came with a cost. Other Nimari could no longer understand her. Her color patterns had become too individual, too unique. She was becoming something new, a social species learning to be solitary. "Is this what humans feel like all the time?" she asked. "More or less," replied Dr. Su Jin, the human xenopsychologist studying the Nimari transformation. "Does it feel wrong?" "It feels powerful and lonely. I understand now why humans can be so decisive in crisis. When you cannot rely on others for every decision, you must trust yourself." Poran shifted into a pattern of colors that had no name in any Nimari language. "But I also understand why other species fear you. Independence is a kind of madness when you are used to sharing every thought." The fear was spreading beyond individual species. Some galactic sectors had declared independence from the old council system, choosing isolation over the risk of contact with unpredictable neighbors. Others were forming military alliances based on shared communication methods rather than shared values. The Keleth and Vorthak had stopped talking entirely. The Nimari were fragmenting into thousands of individual entities. Trade routes that had operated for millennia were breaking down as merchant species lost the ability to coordinate complex transactions. And in the growing silence, new kinds of violence were emerging. The first silent war began in the Kepler sector, where two minor species started attacking each other without declaration or warning. Ships would simply appear, destroy their targets, and vanish again. No demands, no negotiations, no communication at all. Other conflicts followed the same pattern. Species that had spent centuries in legal disputes over territorial boundaries suddenly started shooting instead of talking. The old rules of civilized warfare, the warnings, the formal challenges, the diplomatic pauses, disappeared completely. Humanity found itself in an impossible position. They had broken the galaxy's communication system, but they seemed to be the only species that could function without it. Human colonies thrived while alien settlements struggled. Human ships patrolled areas that other species had abandoned. Some alien leaders began to see humans as the only hope for restoring order. Others saw them as the ultimate threat, a species that had deliberately destroyed galactic civilization to make room for human expansion. Captain Bo Young, now promoted to Admiral, received messages from both groups. Some alien commanders wanted human protection. Others wanted to surrender before humanity decided to conquer them. But the strangest message came from a source she hadn't expected. A group of young aliens from different species who called themselves the Silent Generation. "We do not want the Yasi, old communication networks, to return," their message said. "We have learned to think for ourselves. We have learned to act without permission. We want to become more like humans." Bo Young read the message twice, then called an emergency conference with Earth Command. "We're not just dealing with a communication breakdown anymore," she reported. "Some alien species are trying to evolve. They want to become independent like humans." "Is that possible?" asked Admiral Dong-hyun. "I don't know. But if it is, we're looking at the birth of an entirely new galactic civilization, one where species can think for themselves instead of relying on constant consensus." "And if it's not possible?" Bo Young looked out at the stars, where the lights of alien cities were going dark one by one. "Then we're watching the old galaxy die, and we're the ones who killed it." 2 years after the Railgun changed everything, the galaxy had learned to whisper. Secretary of Galactic Affairs Haya Jin stood before the rebuilt council chamber, watching representatives from dozens of species take their seats in a formation that would have been impossible under the old system. Instead of the constant chatter that had once filled these meetings, there was something new: comfortable silence. The Vorthak delegate, Crystal Singer Min-ho, sat quietly in his crystal chair, his body a calm blue that meant thoughtful meditation. 6 months ago, such silence from a Vorthak would have indicated death or madness. Now it meant that he was thinking. The Nimari representative floated in a controlled cloud formation, her colors shifting slowly through patterns of individual contemplation. She was no longer part of the collective mind that had once defined her species. She was herself, alone and thinking. Even the HFY War speaker sat without clicking, his four eyes closed in what humans had learned to recognize as the HFY equivalent of meditation. Ye Jin had spent 2 years learning how to run meetings like this. It had not been easy. The breakthrough had come from an unexpected source, a human child. Kyung-ho was 8 years old and had been born on a space station where humans, Vorthak, and Nimari worked together. He spoke Korean with his parents, Crystal Song, with his Vorthak teachers, and color patterns with his Nimari friends. But more importantly, he understood something that the adults had missed. You don't have to talk all the time, he had explained to a group of diplomats who were struggling with communication breakdowns. Sometimes thinking is better than talking. The child had demonstrated by organizing a playground game where alien children took turns speaking while others listened in silence. The game lasted for hours without a single argument or misunderstanding. "How is this possible?" asked Dr. Wu Jin, the xenolinguist who had been studying the breakdown of galactic communication. "Easy," said Kyung-ho. "You think first, then you talk. If you talk first, you can't think." That simple observation had led to the development of the silent protocol. Admiral Bo Young had worked with engineer Ga-eun to create something that had never existed before, a communication system that included scheduled silence. Instead of constant chatter, the new network provided quiet windows where species could think independently between communication sessions. The first test had been a disaster. Alien diplomats panicked when the communication channels went silent. They thought their equipment was broken or that they were under attack. But gradually, some began to adapt. The Vorthak were the first to understand. Their crystal minds, freed from the constant noise of galactic chatter, began to think more clearly than they had in centuries. They discovered that they could solve complex problems in minutes when they weren't constantly interrupted by other voices. The Nimari took longer to adjust, but some individuals learned to exist as separate entities during the quiet periods. They found that their colors became more vivid and their thoughts more original when they weren't sharing every emotion with the collective. Even some Keleth began to appreciate the new system. Young warriors like Commander Jin Woo discovered that they could make battle decisions much faster when they didn't have to wait for clan approval of every action. But the real test came when conflict erupted in the Tau Ceti system. 2 alien species, the crystalline Zephyrite and the plant-like Verdani, had been locked in a territorial dispute for decades. Under the old communication system, their argument would have continued for years while diplomats debated every detail. Under the silent protocol, something different happened. Captain Yoon Soo of the human peacekeeping ship New Harmony arrived at Tau Ceti to find both fleets facing each other in traditional battle formation. But instead of the usual non-stop broadcasting of demands and counter-demands, both sides were observing a scheduled quiet period. "This is Captain Yoon Soo," she transmitted during the next communication window. "I'm here to help resolve this dispute. But first, I suggest we all take 10 minutes to think about what we really want." The Zephyrite commander, Crystal Lord Sang-min, had been preparing for war according to the old traditions. But the silence gave him time to consider something new. What would actually happen if they fought? The Verdani leader, root speaker Da-Yun, used her quiet time to imagine what her world would look like after a war. The image was not pleasant. When the communication window reopened, both commanders had reached the same conclusion. Perhaps, Crystal Lord Sang-min transmitted, "We should discuss sharing this system instead of fighting over it." The negotiation that followed took 3 hours instead of 3 years. With scheduled quiet periods between each discussion point, both sides had time to think clearly about their options. They reached an agreement that satisfied everyone. More importantly, they had done it without human interference. The silent protocol had allowed two alien species to solve their own problems. Word of the success spread quickly through the new communication network. Species that had been preparing for silent wars began to request human assistance in implementing the new system. But not everyone was happy with the changes. The old guard diplomats who had built careers on endless negotiation and debate found themselves obsolete. Some alien leaders complained that the new system gave too much power to individual decision-makers. "Where is the consensus?" demanded Vorthak Elder Taejong during one council session. "Where is the collective wisdom that has guided us for millennia?" "It's still there," replied Human Ambassador Minna. "But now it's balanced with individual thought. Consensus is stronger when it's chosen rather than automatic." The real challenge came from species that simply could not adapt to the new system. The harmonic collective, a species that existed as pure sound, could not function in silence. Their entire existence was based on constant communication. When the silent protocol was implemented in their space, they began to die. "We cannot be quiet," their representatives explained through synthesized voices. "Silence is death for us." It was Kyung-ho, now 10 years old and fluent in 7 alien languages, who suggested the solution. "Maybe some species don't need to be quiet," he said. "Maybe they can be the voices that talk when others are listening." This led to the development of specialized roles within the new galactic civilization. Species that thrived on constant communication became the network administrators, maintaining contact between systems during quiet periods. Species that preferred silence became the deep thinkers, solving complex problems during extended meditation periods. Humanity found its own role as the bridge species, comfortable with both communication and silence, able to help others transition between the two states. 3 years after the Railgun incident, Ambassador Hyun-woo stood before the first fully integrated Galactic Council session. The chamber no longer buzzed with constant noise. Instead, representatives spoke in turns, with moments of thoughtful silence between each statement. "The galaxy has learned something new," he said to the assembled delegates. "We have learned that communication is not just about talking, it's about knowing when to listen." The Vorthak delegate sang a note of agreement, then fell silent to let others respond. The Nimari representative shifted into colors that meant understanding, then condensed into a tight formation that indicated individual contemplation. The Keleth War speaker clicked once, sharply, which in the new protocol meant acknowledged and considered. Then came the most important moment, a full minute of complete silence while everyone thought about what had been said. When the communication period reopened, crystal singer Min-ho spoke for many species. "We were afraid when the talking stopped. We thought it meant the end of civilization. But perhaps it was just the beginning of wisdom. The galaxy had learned humanity's greatest gift, that sometimes the most important communication happens in the spaces between words." Admiral Bo Young, now serving as Director of Galactic Communications, watched the proceedings from the observation deck. Next to her stood Engineer Ga-un, whose railgun had started this entire transformation. "Do you ever regret pulling that trigger?" Bo Young asked. Ga-un smiled. "Every weapon I ever built was designed to destroy something. This is the first one that actually created something better." Below them, the council session continued in its new rhythm of speech and silence, thought and communication, individual decision, and collective wisdom. The galaxy had forgotten how to talk, but humanity had taught it how to listen. And in learning to listen, the galaxy had discovered something that had been missing for thousands of years: the courage to think for itself. The stars still had voices, but now they also had thoughts. And in the space between voice and thought, a new kind of civilization was being born, one that understood that true communication required both the wisdom to speak and the strength to be silent. The greatest conversations, it turned out, were the ones that included time to think about what was being said, and that was a lesson that would echo through the galaxy for generations to come.